It was a bright afternoon in New York City, the kind of day when people hurried through the streets chasing time and dreams. Inside a fancy restaurant with golden lights and soft jazz music, the atmosphere was calm yet alive. The place was popular among rich business people, celebrities and those who wanted to feel important, but for the staff it was just another long, busy day. Amara Johnson, a young black woman in her late 20s, moved gracefully between tables. She wore her uniform neatly, her dark hair tied back and her eyes full of quiet focus. She wasn't just another waitress, though no one could see that at first glance. Amara carried herself with calm confidence, always smiling politely, always ready to help. She had been working there for nearly 2 years, saving money for her dream, to travel the world and study more languages. To her, every customer was an opportunity to observe, to listen, to learn something new. That afternoon, the door opened with a rush of laughter and expensive cologne. A group of businessmen walked in, all dressed in tailored suits. At the center was Mr. Richard Thompson, a tall, middle-aged millionaire with gray hair, gold rings, and a loud laugh that filled the room. He was known among staff for his arrogance. He tipped well but talked down to people, treating waiters as if they were invisible. Everyone in the restaurant recognized the type, powerful, rich, but not kind. Amara noticed them right away. She could feel the shift in the room, how the other waiters tensed slightly. "Table 6, the manager whispered to her. "VIP guests. Be careful, Amara." She nodded calmly and walked over with her notepad and warm smile. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she said softly. "Welcome back to the Golden Leaf. Would you like to start with drinks?" Mr. Thompson glanced at her briefly, then looked away as if she were part of the furniture. "Sure," he said, not even meeting her eyes. "Bring us your best red wine. And make it quick, sweetheart." Amara's smile didn't fade. "Of course, sir," she replied gently and walked off. She had dealt with worse. Working in a high-end restaurant meant you needed to master patience as much as you did service. As she prepared the wine, she overheard bits of their conversation, talk of profits, investments, and travel. They spoke about countries and cultures, but in a tone that sounded more like bragging than appreciation. When she returned with the wine, she poured carefully, her movements smooth and practiced. Mr. Thompson watched her for a moment, then turned to his friends. "You know," he said loudly, "I travel all over the world, and it's funny how few people actually speak another language. Americans especially, they're hopeless." The men laughed. One of them added, "Yeah, everyone should at least know Chinese these days. That's where the money is." Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, amused by his own thoughts. Then noticing Amara again, he smirked. "Hey, miss," he said suddenly, waving his glass. "You speak Chinese?" Amara blinked, a bit surprised. "Excuse me, sir?" "I said," he repeated, "do you speak Chinese? I'll give you $100,000 if you do." He laughed loudly and his friends joined in. It was meant as a joke, a small show of power, the rich man teasing the waitress, assuming she couldn't possibly meet his challenge. Amara smiled faintly, her mind calm. Inside, she felt something shift, not anger but curiosity. She looked at him with steady eyes. The table went silent for a moment, sensing her confidence. "Would you like me to answer in Mandarin or Cantonese, sir?" she said gently. For a second, no one spoke. Mr. Thompson's smile froze. His friends looked at each other in disbelief. One of them whispered, "Wait, did she just—" Amara stood there quietly, her expression kind but firm. The entire restaurant seemed to pause. Even the music faded in the background. Mr. Thompson's laughter had vanished, replaced by surprise. He tried to play it off with a small chuckle. "You're joking," he said. Amara shook her head slightly. Then in perfect Mandarin, she said a simple greeting, introducing herself and thanking them for visiting the restaurant. Her pronunciation was flawless, her tone natural. One of the businessmen, who happened to know some Mandarin, nearly dropped his glass. "She's fluent," he said softly. "That's incredible." Customers at nearby tables began to notice the scene. Some smiled, others whispered. The arrogant millionaire, known for his loud jokes, now sat quietly, his ego shrinking before everyone's eyes. Amara didn't gloat. She simply bowed her head slightly, her polite smile unchanged. "Will there be anything else for you, gentlemen?" she asked in English, her voice calm. In that instant, something changed in the air. Mr. Thompson stared at her, realizing he had completely misjudged her. His laughter had turned into silence and his pride into embarrassment. Amara walked away gracefully, her steps steady, her heart beating fast but full of quiet pride. Behind her, the men whispered in shock, trying to process what they had just witnessed. The millionaire, once so sure of his power, sat still, his glass untouched. For the first time in years, he had been humbled, not by another rich man, not by money, but by a waitress who carried wisdom, grace, and intelligence beyond his imagination. And that was just the beginning of what would become one of the most unforgettable stories ever told in that restaurant. A story that would soon travel far beyond its golden walls, turning a simple challenge into a powerful lesson about respect, humility, and the hidden brilliance of ordinary people. The laughter still echoed faintly in the air as Amara walked toward the kitchen, pretending not to notice the glances that followed her. The moment had passed, or at least that's what everyone thought. But inside Mr. Thompson's mind, something restless stirred. He wasn't used to being surprised, especially not by someone he had assumed was beneath his level. As he sipped his wine, he tried to brush off the embarrassment. She probably just memorized a few words, he muttered to his companions, trying to reclaim his authority. His friends nodded quickly, not daring to contradict him. Still, a flicker of curiosity crossed his eyes. How could a waitress of all people speak Mandarin so fluently? A few minutes later, Amara returned with their appetizers. Her movements were graceful, almost rhythmic, the kind that came from patience and discipline. She placed each dish with care, her calm presence softening even the arrogant atmosphere around the table. Mr. Thompson, watching her silently, couldn't help but test her again. "So," he said, leaning forward with a smirk, "you know some Chinese, impressive, but that's not enough for $100,000. Amara met his gaze, unshaken. "Of course, sir," she said with quiet confidence. He chuckled again, but this time it sounded forced. "Tell me," he continued, "can you say something in another language then? Maybe French? Or Arabic?" Amara didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him with a spark of mischief in her eyes, the kind that hinted she was far more capable than anyone realized. Then with elegance and perfect pronunciation, she replied in French, "Bienvenue à the Golden Leaf, monsieur. C'est un honneur de vous servir aujourd'hui." A few heads turned from nearby tables. The words flowed like silk, her accent precise, her tone melodic. One of Mr. Thompson's friends blinked in shock. "That's perfect French," he whispered. "She sounds like a native," but Amara wasn't done. Before the millionaire could recover, she switched seamlessly to Arabic, greeting them with warmth, her words rich and rhythmic. Then, in Spanish, she described the dish she had just served, making even the restaurant staff pause in admiration. By the time she finished, the table was silent again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was heavier, deeper, filled with awe. Mr. Thompson leaned back slowly, his smirk completely gone now. How many languages do you speak?" he asked, his voice quieter than before. Amara smiled modestly. "9, sir," she said softly. The number hit him like a wave. His friends exchanged stunned glances. Someone dropped their fork. Another muttered under their breath, "9? Did she say 9? Suddenly the entire restaurant felt smaller. People nearby had stopped eating, pretending to adjust napkins or sip their drinks just to listen. Even the manager peeked from behind the counter, eyes wide. Mr. Thompson didn't know what to say. He had started the conversation as a joke, a display of arrogance, but now he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Respect. True, humbled respect. Amara, sensing the shift, simply continued doing her job with the same calmness she had at the beginning. She didn't gloat or boast. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke louder than any words could. She moved with quiet pride, her heart steady, her mind clear. The millionaire, meanwhile, was left in silent reflection. For the first time, he saw past the uniform, past the job title, past the skin color. He saw a woman with a mind sharper than his own pride. A woman who had earned knowledge through passion, not privilege. A strange mix of guilt and admiration filled him. He had come to the restaurant expecting a routine lunch, but he had found something far more valuable than a meal. A lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his life. And yet, deep down he still wasn't ready to admit defeat. The challenge, though unintended, had just begun. Because as the whispers spread across the room and phones quietly began to record, Everyone knew they were witnessing a story that would not end at that table. It was only getting started, and what would happen next would surprise them all even more. The air inside the restaurant felt different now, like something electric was flowing through it. Conversations at nearby tables had softened into whispers, and curious eyes followed Amara as she moved around the room. People had come for lunch, but now they were witnessing something they'd remember for years. Mr. Thompson sat quietly, swirling his wine but not really tasting it. His laughter had vanished completely, replaced by a mix of confusion and curiosity. He had met world leaders, investors, and scholars, but never, not once, had he been caught off guard by a waitress in a small restaurant. His pride, which usually towered over everyone around him, now felt unsteady. He looked at Amara again as she approached with dessert menus. Her steps were light, her face calm, as though nothing extraordinary had just happened. "You're full of surprises," he said, his tone softer this time. "Where did you learn all that?" Amara placed the menus gently on the table. "Mostly from books," she said with a faint smile. "And from people." "People?" one of the businessmen asked. "Yes," she continued. "Every customer has a story. Some speak another language. Some share a word or two when they're relaxed. I listen, I remember. I study later." The table went silent again. No arrogance, no laughter. Just genuine interest. Even Mr. Thompson, who had started this whole thing as a joke, leaned forward like a student eager to understand his teacher. Then, without warning, Amara asked, "Would you like to hear something beautiful?" Before anyone could answer, she began reciting a short Chinese proverb in Mandarin. Her voice was soft yet clear, floating through the restaurant like music. It was about humility, about how the tallest tree bends the most when it bears fruit, a lesson about pride and respect. When she finished, she translated it for them in English, explaining its meaning with grace and calm confidence. The message hung in the air like poetry, and even those who didn't understand a word of Mandarin could feel its weight. For the first time that day, Mr. Thompson didn't have a comeback. He looked down at his watch, not to check the time, but to avoid her gaze. Something inside him stirred, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't embarrassment anymore. It was reflection. Across the room, a few diners clapped softly. Others smiled. Even the chef peeked through the kitchen door, curious about what was happening. Amara blushed, embarrassed by the attention, and waved them off politely. "It's nothing," she said. Just words, but they weren't just words. They were power. Quiet, intelligent power. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. 9 languages, huh? He said finally, trying to sound casual. "That must take a lot of time." "It takes patience," Amara replied. "And love. I love learning how people think, how they speak, how they feel through their language." Her words hit deeper than she intended. Around the table, the men who once laughed began to see her differently. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a living example of something rare. Dedication without recognition. Mr. Thompson nodded slowly, his earlier arrogance melting into something almost gentle. "You know," he said, forcing a small laugh, "I was serious about the offer. 100,000. You've earned it." Amara looked surprised but shook her head politely. "That's very kind, sir, but I don't need it." He frowned. "You don't want the money?" She smiled. "Money can buy comfort," she said softly, "but not respect. That's something we give and earn." The restaurant went quiet again. Her words sank deep into everyone's mind like drops of truth falling into still water. Mr. Thompson sat back, speechless. The man who had spent a lifetime chasing wealth suddenly felt small in front of someone who valued wisdom more than gold. At another table, someone whispered, "She just turned a bet into a life lesson." And they were right. That moment, that calm exchange between a powerful man and a humble woman, carried a quiet kind of magic. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but it changed something invisible in the room. As Amara walked away to attend to another table, the millionaire watched her go, his expression thoughtful. For the first time, his laughter didn't echo with pride. It carried something else. Respect. He didn't know it yet, but that encounter would follow him long after he left the restaurant. It would replay in his mind during meetings, parties, and sleepless nights, reminding him that sometimes the richest person in the room isn't the one with the biggest wallet. It's the one with the biggest heart. As the evening sun dipped lower outside, the soft golden light filtered through the restaurant's tall glass windows. The once busy chatter of lunchtime had mellowed into a hush. People weren't just dining anymore. They were waiting quietly to see what would happen next. Word had already spread. A few diners who had witnessed Amara's earlier exchange whispered to new arrivals, "That waitress? She speaks 9 languages." Soon, curious eyes began turning toward her as she moved gracefully between tables, her expression calm, her steps steady. At Mr. Thompson's table, the tension had shifted. What started as arrogance had transformed into quiet awe. His friends, who once laughed the loudest, now sat with their phones discreetly angled toward Amara, recording her every move. The restaurant manager peeked from the counter, torn between pride and disbelief. When Amara returned with their main course, the room felt different. The air seemed to hum with anticipation, as if everyone could sense that something extraordinary was still about to unfold. Mr. Thompson, now quieter and more respectful, said softly, "Miss Johnson, would you mind showing us again? Something else, perhaps?" Amara hesitated. "You mean another language?" He nodded. "Anything you like." She thought for a moment, then smiled faintly. "All right," she said, "but only if you promise not to laugh this time." He raised a hand. "You have my word." She took a deep breath and began speaking, not in Mandarin nor in French this time, but in Korean. Her voice was gentle and musical, her pronunciation so precise that a woman at a nearby table gasped. Recognizing the language immediately, Amara spoke about kindness, how in every culture, respect bridges the gap between strangers. As she finished, she switched effortlessly to Swahili, her tone rich and lyrical, filling the room like a song. Every word carried emotion, not just sound. A man seated across the room, who happened to be Kenyan, stood up in surprise. "That's perfect Swahili," he exclaimed proudly. "She even has the accent right." The room erupted with soft applause. People smiled, eyes wide with wonder. Phones lifted higher. Cameras flashed quietly. It was no longer about a bet or a joke. It had become a moment of shared humanity, of inspiration. Mr. Thompson couldn't hide his amazement anymore. 9 languages, he whispered again, almost to himself. How can someone know so much? Amara shrugged lightly, her smile warm but modest. "When you grow up with little, you learn to listen," she said softly. Languages are just different ways of listening. Her words hit him deeper than she realized. The millionaire, who had spent years talking over people, suddenly understood what it meant to truly listen. For the first time, he looked at her not as a waitress, but as a teacher, someone who carried a kind of wisdom that money could never buy. A moment later, one of his friends leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Say something in Japanese," he urged. Amara laughed softly. "All right," she said. Then she bowed slightly and spoke in perfect Japanese, greeting them formally and thanking them for their patience. The sound of her voice carried such authenticity that even the chef, who was part Japanese, came out from the kitchen to listen. "Beautiful," the chef murmured. "Truly beautiful." Applause filled the restaurant again, not wild or loud, but genuine and heartfelt. People weren't clapping for a performance. They were clapping for her story, for the quiet brilliance that had just bloomed before them. In the midst of it all, Amara simply bowed her head politely and whispered, "Thank you," as if it were the most ordinary thing in the world. Mr. Thompson sat there, his heart strangely heavy. The same man who once mocked her now felt small in comparison. He realized that wealth didn't make him important, understanding did. And at that moment he understood something powerful. Greatness often hides in the quiet corners of life, wearing humble uniforms and soft smiles. As Amara walked away to serve another table, a young girl sitting nearby turned to her mother and whispered, "Mommy, I want to be like her." Her mother smiled. "Then learn to listen, sweetheart," she replied. And as the restaurant filled with quiet admiration, Mr. Thompson sat in silence, not out of shame, but out of gratitude. For the first time in years, someone had reminded him of something he had long forgotten. That respect cannot be demanded. It can only be earned through grace, humility, and heart. The restaurant had never felt so alive. The air buzzed softly, like invisible energy weaving between the tables. People who had come for dinner now sat in silence, watching Amara as if she were the main event. Even the waiters paused between steps, pretending to straighten plates just to stay nearby. Mr. Thompson sat still, hands folded on the table, eyes fixed on her. The arrogance that had entered the restaurant with him hours earlier had vanished completely. In its place was something new, humility. His friends, once laughing and loud, now stared at Amara with genuine admiration. After a few moments, one of them asked curiously, "Amara, how did you learn all these languages? Did you go to university?" She smiled softly, shaking her head. "No, sir. I couldn't afford college. I learned from people and from books, movies, online videos. Every word I learned made me feel closer to the world." The table fell silent again. The millionaire's eyes softened. "You're self-taught?" he asked quietly, almost disbelieving. "Yes," she said, still smiling. "I used to work double shifts. I'd save my tips to buy old dictionaries or second-hand language guides. I would stay up late whispering words to myself. Sometimes customers from other countries helped me practice. That's how I got better." There was no pride in her tone, only sincerity, and that made it even more powerful. Mr. Thompson's heart twisted with guilt. He remembered how he had mocked her earlier, how he had used his wealth as a weapon. Now, sitting before this young woman who had taught herself 9 languages with determination and curiosity, he realized he was the student, not the teacher. He took a deep breath. "You said 9 languages," he said, voice trembling slightly. "Which ones?" Amara counted softly on her fingers. "English, Mandarin, Cantonese, French, Spanish, Arabic, Korean, Swahili, and Japanese." A low murmur spread across the room. People looked at one another, shaking their heads in disbelief. Some even began clapping again, unable to hold back their amazement. But Amara raised her hand politely, asking them to stop. "Please," she said, "don't clap for me. There are so many people like me who work quietly, who have gifts you may never see. I'm just lucky someone asked the right question today." Her words struck deeper than any speech. They carried truth, the kind that made even strangers reflect on their own lives. A woman near the window whispered to her husband, "She's right. We walk past people every day, never realizing how much brilliance they hide." Mr. Thompson swallowed hard. He reached for his wallet, his fingers trembling slightly. "You've earned this," he said, pulling out a checkbook. $100,000. I don't go back on my word." Amara looked at him, not with greed but with warmth. "That's very kind, sir," she said softly, "but I can't accept it." He frowned. "Why not?" She smiled gently. "Because money wasn't the lesson here." "What lesson?" he asked, confused. "That we all have value," she said quietly. "Sometimes it just takes one moment of respect to see it." Those words hit him harder than he expected. For a long moment he just sat there, eyes glassy, lost for words. Around the room no one spoke. Even the clinking of glasses had stopped. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary. Not a show, not a performance, but a genuine human connection. After a long pause, Mr. Thompson stood up slowly. His chair scraped softly against the floor. He walked around the table until he stood in front of Amara. Everyone held their breath, unsure what he would do. Then, to everyone's surprise, he extended his hand. "Miss Johnson," he said, his voice low but steady, "you've taught me something I should have known long ago. You've reminded me that true wealth isn't in what we own, but in what we know, and how we treat others." Amara shook his hand, smiling warmly. "Thank you, sir," she said. For the first time that night, the applause was loud, not the kind that came from amusement, but from admiration. Every person in the restaurant clapped for her, for the lesson she had just given the world without even trying. As Amara walked away, her heart was full, not of pride, but of peace. She didn't need money to prove her worth. She had already earned something far greater: respect, love, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had changed someone's heart. And as for Mr. Thompson, he sat back down, humbled, his reflection shimmering in the half-empty glass of wine before him. He smiled faintly to himself, whispering, 9 languages, and not one word of arrogance. That night, the restaurant didn't just serve food, it served a story. One that every witness would carry home, retelling it again and again. Each time remembering the day a waitress taught a millionaire the true meaning of value. The next day, the story was already spreading like wildfire. Someone at the restaurant had recorded the moment, The challenge, the languages, and the handshake that followed. By morning, the video was everywhere, on social media feeds, news pages, and trending lists. The title read, "Millionaire challenges waitress to speak Chinese to and regrets it instantly." But for Amara, life went on quietly. She woke up early, made tea, and got ready for her next shift just like always. She wasn't thinking about fame or viral videos. To her, it had just been another day. One where she had done her job and maybe taught someone a small lesson about respect. When she arrived at work, though, the atmosphere was different. Her coworkers clapped as she entered, cheering her name. The manager, a cheerful man named Carlos, grinned widely. "Amara, you're famous," he said, showing her his phone. Her face was everywhere. Clips of her speaking different languages had been viewed millions of times overnight. Amara blinked in disbelief. "I didn't even know someone was recording," she said, laughing nervously. "Well, the whole world knows now," Carlos said proudly. "And you should see the comments. People are calling you an inspiration." As the day went on, customers came not just to eat, but to meet her. Some asked for photos, others simply thanked her for reminding them to stay humble. One elderly woman held her hand and said, "My grandson showed me your video. You made me cry, dear. The world needs more people like you." Amara smiled shyly, her heart warm but still humble. She didn't feel like a celebrity, just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time, doing what she loved. Meanwhile, somewhere across town, Mr. Thompson sat in his office staring at his computer screen. The video of himself laughing and then watching Amara speak 9 languages flawlessly had gone viral. Millions of people had seen it. The comments weren't kind to him. "Rich man learns a lesson in humility. This waitress deserves more respect than his entire table combined. Money doesn't buy class." He scrolled through the reactions in silence. Normally he would have been furious, but today was different. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel angry. He felt thankful. He saw himself from the outside, and he didn't like the man in that video. But he liked who he was becoming because of it. Later that afternoon, he walked back into the restaurant, this time alone. The same golden lights shone across the room and the same soft music played, but everything felt different now. Amara noticed him as soon as he entered. For a second, she thought he might be angry or embarrassed, but the look on his face surprised her. It was gentle, almost apologetic. He waited until the rush quieted, then approached her counter. "Miss Johnson," he said, smiling faintly, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, sir," she said politely. "Welcome back." He hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I wanted to thank you for that day. You didn't just embarrass me, you educated me. You made me see things I've ignored for years." Amara tilted her head slightly, touched by his honesty. "You didn't have to come back," she said softly. "I did," he said firmly. "I owed you that. I've built my life around money, but I forgot what real value looks like. You reminded me." He took out an envelope and placed it on the counter. "I know you refused the money before," he said, "but this isn't about pride anymore. It's a scholarship fund. I've arranged it in your name and for students who want to learn languages but can't afford it." Amara froze, eyes wide. "You did what?" He smiled. "It's the least I could do. You've shown me that knowledge is priceless, and now I want to make sure others have the same chance." For a moment, Amara couldn't speak. Her eyes glistened with tears. She clasped her hands together, overwhelmed. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." He nodded humbly. "No, Miss Johnson," he said softly. "Thank you." They stood there for a moment. Two people from completely different worlds. One who had everything, and one who had earned everything, now connected by mutual respect. As he left, Amara looked down at the envelope again, her heart full. The man who once mocked her had turned her act of humility into a legacy for others. The restaurant buzzed with quiet joy that evening. Her coworkers teased her gently, calling her the internet's favorite waitress. She laughed, but deep down, she felt something far greater than fame. She felt purpose. That night, as she walked home under the city lights, Amara thought about how strange life could be. How one small moment, one careless challenge could turn into something that touched millions. She looked up at the stars and smiled. Sometimes she realized life doesn't change because you chase it. It changes because you stay true to yourself, even when no one expects you to. Days turned into weeks, but the story of Amara and the millionaire didn't fade. It grew stronger. People around the world continued to share it online, calling it the story that restored faith in humanity. News reporters wanted interviews, podcasts wanted her voice, and even schools invited her to speak to students about perseverance and self-worth. Yet, despite all the attention, Amara remained the same, calm, graceful, and humble. She still worked at the restaurant, serving customers with the same gentle smile. She didn't see herself as a celebrity. To her, she was still just a woman doing her job, learning from every moment life gave her. But everything around her had quietly changed. The restaurant was busier than ever, filled with people who wanted to see her in person. Strangers brought her flowers, thank you cards, even handwritten letters from across the world. Some came from people who said her story gave them hope, students who wanted to study again, parents who promised to be kinder, and workers who said they finally felt seen. One evening, as Amara cleaned up after closing, she found a small white envelope left on one of the tables. It didn't have a name on it, just a short note inside that read, "You changed my life. Keep shining. RT." She smiled softly. She didn't need to guess who it was. Meanwhile, Mr. Richard Thompson had changed too, in ways even he didn't fully understand. The arrogant businessman who once believed money defined success now spent his days helping fund education programs for underprivileged youth. His company launched a new foundation, the Amara Initiative, dedicated to promoting language learning and cultural respect around the world. When reporters asked him about it, he simply said, "Because one woman taught me that real intelligence isn't in what you know, it's in how you treat others while knowing it." Back at the restaurant, Amara was finishing another busy evening when the door opened quietly. She looked up and saw a group of young students walk in, each holding a small folder and a shy smile. Their teacher approached her. "Miss Johnson," the teacher said warmly, "these are the first recipients of the scholarship you inspired. They wanted to meet you in person." Amara froze for a moment, overwhelmed. The children, boys and girls from different backgrounds, handed her thank you notes written in different languages. One of them said softly, "We want to learn just like you." Her eyes filled with tears. She knelt down and smiled at them. "Promise me something," she said gently. "Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel small because of what they think you can't do." The children nodded eagerly, their faces glowing with admiration. Behind them, Mr. Thompson stood quietly watching. He hadn't told her he would be there. He just wanted to see how far the ripple of her kindness had reached. When their eyes met, he gave her a small nod. Not the nod of a rich man acknowledging a favor, but of a human being saying thank you, from one soul to another. Later that night, after everyone left, Amara sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. Her reflection glowed softly against the glass. She thought about everything that had happened. One joke, one challenge, one moment that had changed so many lives. She whispered to herself, "All I did was speak." But deep down, she knew it was more than that. She hadn't just spoken languages. She had spoken truth, respect, and grace into a world that often forgot how powerful kindness could be. Somewhere across town, Mr. Thompson sat by his window too, the city lights reflecting off the glass of water beside him. He smiled quietly as he replayed her words in his mind. And though they came from two different worlds, both of them carried the same feeling that night, a quiet peace, a shared gratitude, and the realization that sometimes a single conversation can rewrite an entire story. That moment had begun as a bet, but it had ended as something far greater, a reminder that dignity speaks louder than money, and that the smallest voices often carry the greatest wisdom. Months passed and life slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm, or at least, it looked that way from the outside. The restaurant still opened at noon every day, the same golden light spilling across the tables, the same music playing softly in the background. But something in that place had changed forever. People still came to eat, but many came for another reason, to meet the waitress who spoke 9 languages. Some brought gifts, others came simply to say thank you. Amara always greeted them with her gentle smile, treating each one not like a fan but like a friend. She still moved with quiet grace, still listened more than she spoke, still found joy in the small things. A clean table, a kind word, a curious child asking, "Can you teach me how to say hello in Chinese?" She never chased fame, She didn't need to. Her story had already found its own wings. One evening, long after closing time, she stood by the window, looking out at the street below. The city glowed with soft lights, people moving like stars across the pavement. She thought about how far things had come, from one careless challenge to a worldwide conversation about respect and possibility. She smiled faintly, whispering to herself, "Funny how the smallest moments can change everything." Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Mr. Thompson. "Just wanted you to know. The Amara Initiative is now active in 14 countries. Thousands of kids are learning languages because of you. Thank you again for changing my life." Amara stared at the screen, tears filling her eyes. Not tears of pride, but of quiet gratitude. She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she whispered softly, "You changed yours too." The world outside kept moving, but inside that restaurant, time felt still for a moment. The girl who once served tables now served as a symbol of humility, intelligence, and courage. She hadn't needed to shout to be heard. She simply spoke with truth, and the world listened. As she closed up for the night, she passed by a small framed picture near the counter, one the manager had put up after her story went viral. It showed her shaking hands with Mr. Thompson, both of them smiling. Underneath it, in elegant script, were the words, "Respect has no price. Kindness needs no language." Amara touched the frame lightly, her reflection blending with the photo. She smiled, turned off the lights, and stepped out into the night air. The city was quiet now, the moon hanging above like a watchful friend. She walked home slowly, her footsteps light against the pavement. Every sound, every face, every breeze felt alive with meaning. She thought about her younger self, the girl who used to study old dictionaries after long shifts, dreaming of speaking to the world. She realized she already had, not through fame, not through fortune, but through respect, grace, and the courage to stay kind in the face of arrogance. And somewhere out there, in classrooms and homes across the world, children were learning new words. Hello, thank you, respect. Carrying forward the legacy of a waitress who turned a millionaire's joke into a lesson for humanity. Amara looked up at the moon one last time and smiled, whispering in Mandarin, "Good night, world." And the night seemed to whisper back, in every language she had ever learned, "Good night, Amara." Because some stories don't end, they simply keep speaking quietly, beautifully, forever.